Today is December 21st, 2021. My name is Kevin, and this is the Punk and Metal project of the Houston Asian American Archive. So today I'll be talking with Kitty Farmer. She's a lead singer of Flooded Tomb, which is a metal band based in Austin. And so thank you so much for, taking the time out of your day to talk with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I love the mission of the Houston Asian American Archive, so I'm excited to be part of it.
Awesome. So I guess before we get into, metal and talking about, um, uh, I guess like your band experience, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your early childhood and, like where you went to school and some of your early musical experiences?
Well, I was born in Gyeonggi-do, just outside of Seoul, South Korea. And when I was 5 months old, I was adopted by a Caucasian American family in Oklahoma City. That's where I grew up. And I guess when I was a kid, all kids love to do those Disney sing-alongs. Just for context, I was born in 1989. So when I was a kid, it was like the Lion King sing-along, Disney princesses, you know, and we would do school plays. We actually did the Lion King as a school play. So I always loved just doing the musical parts of those. And then when I got a little bit older, I watched the Matrix movies and I got those soundtracks, which is what got me interested in like rock music and heavier music. And so when I was 15, yeah, I think I was 15, I joined my first metal band. I don't know if it sounded like anything because we were just, kids, but in Oklahoma City, I went to Westminster schools up until 8th grade. Then I went to Classen School of Advanced Studies. So that's like an international baccalaureate school. And I moved to Austin to go to UT.
So you kind of touched briefly on how you got into, like rock music from the Matrix movies. So from there, can you tell us a bit about like some of the gateway bands that you had going into like, like metal and even like more heavy music?
Oh, that's a good question. So the band that jumped out to me the most on that soundtrack was Rage Against the Machine. So Rage Against the Machine and Audioslave and Soundgarden were a few of my gateway bands. Also Pearl Jam, Tool, and A Perfect Circle. When I started like listening to rock radio and getting into those kinds of bands. And then I guess from there, I kind of realized that I liked kind of that heavier, distorted guitar sound. So the first metal albums I got for myself were from Arch Enemy, Night Rage, and Dark Tranquillity. And so I feel like that kind of shaped my taste because I love all kinds of heavy metal, but my main favorite sound, I guess, is that like melodic death metal. And it was because of those bands.
Um, and so like when you were listening to those bands, were you um, so what drawed you kind of to singing as opposed to, like guitar or drums?
Uh, Again, that's a really good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. I think it was from being a little kid doing those sing-alongs and doing those musical theater productions as a kid. I loved singing. I love kind of the physicality and the feeling of it. It just makes me feel alive and it makes me feel engaged. And to be honest, I just never had like an aptitude for musical instruments anyway. I played bass in a band for a little bit. And when I did that, A, I wasn't like the best bass player, and B, I was kind of jealous of the lead singer. I was like, oh, I want to be the lead singer. And that was kind of my cue, like, okay, from now on, you should really only be, the lead vocalist.
So you mentioned like as a teen, you kind of got into, like making music with a band or like playing with a band. So can you tell us more about kind of like that first band experience?
Well, so I was, yeah, maybe, I think I was 15 because at the beginning I couldn't drive myself. And everybody in suburban Oklahoma gets their driver's license on their 16th birthday because it's so spread out. So I must have been 15, and I met my first band actually on a message board called oklahomarock.com. And I just went to the drummer's house and we played. It was just me, a drummer, and a bass player. There was no guitarist. We played Iron Maiden covers and stuff. I had so much fun. Obviously, I wasn't kind of expecting that being in a band is different than singing along with a backing track. I don't know why. I should have known that going in, but it was a lot of fun. And the drummer and I are still really good friends today.
Awesome. And I guess, like when like lay people think about like vocals in like metal, especially metal, they think of like the vocals kind of as like, like unskilled, like screaming in a sense. So they don't actually understand how hard it is, to scream and growl like that. So kind of how did you learn to, scream?
Probably badly, like a lot of us back in the day, just screaming along with your favorite music, trying to figure out how to make that sound, reading articles and, watching videos. I had the DVD, The Zen of Screaming by Melissa Cross, which is a lot of people think it's super helpful. And I personally, like, I learned better with like an individualized approach. I need my handheld. So basically, when I, okay, long story. So after I was in that first band, I wasn't in a band again until I was 29 years old. So a long time elapsed between, that first experience and then my first band that started gigging. And in that band, I felt a lot of anxiety around my vocals. I was kind of scared that I would open my mouth and no sound would come out. So when I left that band I was in when I was 29, which conveniently was over the COVID pandemic, I had downtime and I took virtual lessons from Extreme Vocal Institute. And that's like a one-on-one virtual thing with a Berkeley grad. And he's fantastic. He really got my mind right. And I don't feel that fear and I don't feel that anxiety. And my old bandmates had actually said there's been a huge improvement in my vocals since I took those lessons. So I have had a lot of help and I'm really glad I did. I think it is important to invest in yourself that way.
And I guess going back to kind of your early childhood, did you have any friends that were into metal or like the same kind of musical taste that you had?
Not really. It wasn't an organic thing like there were metalheads at school or whatever. There was one friend that I had in school that was a metal fan like me. And he was like a little bit older than I was. So it wasn't like we were hanging out all the time. My friends who were into metal music, I met them online on that Oklahoma Rock forum, my first band, of course. And then I met an amazing person named Megan, and she was actually the first woman death metal vocalist that I had met in person, and she really inspired me, and we're still friends too.
And later on, I want to talk more about kind of your experience, especially as an Asian American in metal. But as a child, how did I guess kids react like when you told them that you liked metal? Because it really goes against I guess the model minority, Asian stereotype.
So a lot of my friends kind of accepted it, but they weren't into it. When I was a teenager, my friends liked to go to, um, they were all ages dance clubs and stuff like that. And they really liked that. It wasn't my thing. There's nothing wrong with it. But, I would go to the all ages dance clubs with them, but they wouldn't go to heavy metal shows with me. Usually my parents would drop me off, or when I could drive, I would drive there and I would go by myself. So even though I wasn't like ostracized or bullied for it, um, not a lot of people participated, if that makes sense.
I guess before we move on to more of your contemporary experiences, do you have or did you kind of have any musical idols as a child or growing up?
So when I was much younger, the Spice Girls came out. So I've always been a big Spice Girls fan. That was, the beginning of their girl power slogans. I was in kindergarten, so obviously that's been really fundamental to me. I got Britney Spears' first album, Baby One More Time, when I was, in grade school. That was such an exciting album for me. I like to sing along with that. That really helps you get into music. And I'm still a big fan of Britney Spears, especially now in her advocacy for people with disabilities who are put, under unfair conservatorship. So she's a big role model for me. When I got older, I mentioned Megan, who was the first female death metal vocalist that I had ever met. And also, when I was younger, I was listening to like metal radio on the internet, and Arch Enemy was the first death metal band that I had ever heard with a female vocalist. So definitely Angela from Arch Enemy, Morgan from Kitty, and when I was younger, definitely Jessica from Jack Off Jill were some idols of mine.
And I guess, do these idols still like influence you today, whether it be, with like songwriting or, your vocal style?
I think they do, especially Angela from Arch Enemy, um, and a lot of vocalists that I kind of latched onto back in the day. Kitty Sarek from the band Decadence. I listen to them a lot, and it definitely influences my style. I want to find that it's like a very like gravelly, growly sound, very distorted, but also has a lot of energy, and that's what I'm aiming for.
Um, so before, you mentioned there's kind of a lapse in time where you weren't really involved in, bands. So what were you doing during that time?
So, you know, after my first band, we kind of went our separate ways. And then I was in that band I told you about where I played bass. After that, I tried to find another band to join, but just nothing ever worked out in Oklahoma City. And then I ended up moving to UT for college. And when I was in college, I worked for KVRX, UT's student run radio station. And I did a heavy metal specialty radio show where I got to interview so many really cool local bands, lots of people that I know today. And I was, to be honest, like I was kind of too shy to tell anybody that I wanted to sing in a metal band. I don't know why. To be honest, I thought that if I tried and I failed, it would be embarrassing. So I just didn't try for a long, long time. And then, kind of after I graduated college, I did take singing lessons, like rock and pop style, for a little bit just for fun. And I had to quit lessons. And my last lesson, the singing teacher was a graduate student from UT's Butler School of Music. And she taught me like a little bit more about doing the death growl and about how your false chords shouldn't touch, they should just kind of vibrate. And that was like a great little nugget of knowledge that carried me through to that first band that I was in as an adult until I could get more in-depth lessons.
And was that first band Dio Occulted?
Yes, we had a lot of fun. I was like looking on Craigslist and the musicians wanted ads, and they were like, well, we're looking for vocalists. And I was like, well, I might as well try it. Like, I feel like as you get older, especially as a woman, you kind of care less about what people think about you, and you can be a little embarrassed and kind of shake it off. And I was almost 30 at the time. So I was like, okay, just go for it, see what happens. And they sent me two songs that didn't have vocal parts yet. And I wrote lyrics, I wrote the vocal patterns, and then I went in and auditioned, and they were like, oh, you're in the band. I was like, oh, what? I couldn't believe it at first. It was really a great moment.
So, as a vocalist, do you kind of have expertise in a specific like subgenre of metal or do you consider yourself like pretty versatile?
That's a great question. I, me personally, have just one vocal style. Pretty much everything I do sounds the same. I would describe it, and I think my good friends would describe it as more fitting to like melodic death metal. But my old band was more like heavier death metal, and my new band is not even a death metal band. They're more like a heavy metal band with my vocals on top. So I think my vocals might be associated with a certain genre, but I don't necessarily perform that genre.
So you kind of briefly talked about, you wrote lyrics for two of the tracks that didn't have vocals. So kind of in general, where do you draw your inspiration from for lyrics?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's changed with time. Um, in my younger years, I suffered more with mental illness than I do now. The main one I have is generalized anxiety disorder. So I would write a lot of songs about like mental illness from my own experiences or from like things that I had talked about with friends. As I kind of moved along, it's like kind of an inspiration from the music too. I heard kind of like those Egyptian sounding scales, so I went with mythological themes. And to me, it really depends on what the song sounds like. I'll sit there and listen to it, and a lot of times the song will kind of tell me what it's about. But I think I would say mainly now, like mythological themes are my favorite.
Uh, and so is there a specific, I guess, reason for why like metal is so suitable for kind of expressing the themes or topics that you incorporate into the songs, or is it just kind of like a natural kind of uh, polymerization?
I would say both. It's definitely natural because I love metal. So it's probably the only genre I would ever want to perform, even though I listen to all genres of music. But also, metal is such an intense form of music, and a lot of the themes in mythology are very intense, also.
So I kind of watched some of your live performances on YouTube.
Oh,
Um, and your ability to scream live is very impressive, I must say. So how do you kind of prepare for a show like the weeks leading up to the show or kind of right before the show?
thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate it. Well, the first thing that I like to do is get my body loose. Walking is one of my favorite forms of exercise, both physically and, for my mental state. As I mentioned before, I have anxiety, but walking and really being present and trying to notice like all the details of the trees and your surroundings is what helps me lessen my anxiety. And then lessening my anxiety in my mind kind of gets my body looser. And to achieve the sound you want, your body has to be loose. So then after that, leading up, I'll try to ease my body into it by doing some exercises, neck stuff, shoulder stuff, breathing exercises, studying lyrics if there's a new song for sure. And then I'll do my vocals with our songs, and I also like to just sing. Lately, I've been singing along to like Glory Hammer songs and Iron Maiden songs just to get the breathing warmed up.
If you're comfortable sharing, could you kind of provide us with um, your perspective on, I guess, mental health like issues, anxiety specifically, especially kind of in as an Asian American, because there's kind of like a stigma around it.
So obviously, I will say, first of all, that I'm not a professional. So these are just my own experiences. Growing up with, I didn't grow up in an Asian family. I grew up in the suburbs of Oklahoma City, and from kindergarten to eighth grade, I actually didn't have any Asian classmates. I had one Latino classmate, one Black classmate for the last 3 years. But first, it was just me and no other Asian people. It was um, like all, my white classmates. My anxiety stems from what my therapist said. It sounds like a cliche, but it's because my mother was exhibiting anxious thought patterns. My therapist was basically saying that she was kind of thinking of reasons to feel like people were persecuting her, and she would communicate like passive aggressively. And knowing that those thought patterns are what I modeled, now I had to kind of undo or combat those thought patterns. So my personal view of my own mental problems um, is that I'm glad it has a name. I didn't feel bad about being diagnosed at all. And also, I was kind of glad to get a diagnosis because I realized that my thinking wasn't normal and it wasn't necessarily healthy, but I also got the tools to undo it. And I feel so much better now. So, my perspective would be getting a diagnosis isn't a bad thing. It's actually empowering because you can get the tools to live a healthier life and just feel better. And now, when my anxiety had a hold of me, I couldn't really enjoy things. I was always thinking, oh, this isn't going to last, or like thinking about the future, but now I can just enjoy the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing kind of your journey with mental health. And I kind of want to go back to you know you as a front woman. So do you have any, I guess, advice for people who are interested in being the front of a band, or what do you think are some elements of a good front woman?
I would say there is no right or wrong way to front a band. I think a lot of times people think that the front person has to move around a lot and just uh, jump around and be all over everywhere. But some of my favorite performances have been by singers who just stood in one place really strong, behind the mic stand. You can really make it your own and you control the energy of the band. So if you want to be that kind of person who stands strong in one place and stands powerfully, that's the kind of energy that the band's going to have. And that's great. That sets you apart. Just lean into what makes you unique. I'm sure anybody who's a singer has gotten compliments from people or gotten comments. And if you think about all those things that people have said about you, you'll realize what makes you different. And then if you lean into it heavily, you can bring something that, no one has seen before, that maybe doesn't exist in your town, that people are going to be excited about.
So now I'd like to transition to your current band, Flooded Tomb. And so can you tell us kind of how you found out about the band, how you joined initially?
So in 2019, when I was gigging a lot with Deocculted, Flooded Tomb was also gigging a lot. And I heard of them because we were scheduled to play a show together, but it didn't happen. Deocculted had to drop off. So I never met them. I knew they existed. And then I think December 2020, they invited me to try out because they were a four-piece band with the rhythm guitarist doing lead vocals. And they were like, we want to find just a lead vocalist that will just sing so we can focus on our instruments. And throughout December, they had two rounds of auditions. So I was actually auditioning for like that whole month. And then in January, they picked the lead vocalist. So that's when I joined.
And can you define for us the type of metal your current band plays, and kind of describe to us your band's sound and influences?
Oh gosh. That's a question that we get a lot because when people hear us live, we don't really fall into specific genre. I think a lot of it has to do with they're very democratic in their songwriting. So all four of the instrumentalists influence the sound and they have so many different interests. Nathan really likes Mastodon. You can hear it in his riffs. Scott and Chris like kind of 90s stuff, like 90s Sepultura, but also gore, down to like punk rock. And I think it all kind of comes in, and each song kind of sounds different. I've heard everything. People have said it sounds like melodic death metal. I've gotten progressive doom. Um, Somebody said it just sounds like heavy metal with screaming over it, which is fair. So I would, when people ask just for publicity or promotion purposes, I just say like it's a heavy metal band. I don't know.
Gotcha. I checked your Bandcamp, And it seems that the latest release was in 2019. And I know you guys are recording new music. So can you tell us a bit about this, or as much as you can tell me about this at this point?
Yes. So in February, I think Nathan brought a song that they had finished musically, but didn't have lyrics, didn't have any vocal parts in place. And it's kind of a two-part song. So he had called it originally Encased in Karst, which I think is a reference to something, but I'm not sure. But it's, like encased in something. And then the second part was called For the Wind to Tear. So, like, nature type stuff. When I heard the song, even though the music itself was like years old, it was a great opportunity for me to add lyrics and be like my first true contribution to the band. And the sounds and kind of like the melodies and stuff kind of suggested to me, okay, the first half is going to be about like ancient Egyptian mythology. The second half is going to be about kind of my personal experiences. And I worked on the lyrics a lot. I revised them and revised them and revised them because I wasn't 100% happy with them. And we recorded that song in October. And at that point, I had revised so much, I can finally say I'm happy with it.
Do you guys have a tentative release for the new music, or not really?
Oh, not really. Hopefully, it'll be out soon. It's been sent off for mastering. So at least hopefully you can hear it soon. I'm not really sure what they want to do in terms of like cover art or like, if they want to put it on Bandcamp or only have it on, Spotify and the streaming services. And hopefully we'll get it figured out soon though.
And are you guys signed to a label, or do you guys like self-release the music?
We self-release. We are not signed to any record label. It's kind of a good thing in a way. Obviously, we would love to have like the promotion and backing of a record label, but a lot of times we have some band members who are in college, getting their master's degree, doing really intense jobs. So being able to set our own schedule is good too.
So now I kind of like to shift to kind of your identity in relation to music. And the first question I have is, some metal bands have incorporated, different cultures, whether it be like Hindu gods into their music. And you kind of talked about how you're incorporating like mythology. So have you, I know you're adopted, but have you ever kind of touch base with your Korean heritage at all? And have you ever thought of maybe infusing some of it into your music or lyrics?
I haven't infused it into the music or lyrics just because for the music, I'm not really involved in like the instrumental parts of the song. So I only have control over the lyrics. And for me, the lyrics have to come like super naturally. I have to just hear the song over and over, and something will eventually come. If Korean stories are myths were on my mind, they probably will someday, but I just have to go with whatever pops up first. As a kid, the adoption agency that facilitated my adoption did a Korean heritage camp, so I've gotten to do that. As an adult, I haven't really been um, in touch with like a Korean community. To be honest with you, sometimes it's hard because a lot of times, um, like first generation Korean Americans have a different relationship with adoptees or people who can't speak Korean and have no background with the culture. But I think things are changing now. Um, and I've also gotten to like interact with the larger Asian community, which is great. Um, as going into high school, I've got to meet people, first generation Chinese immigrants, first generation Vietnamese and Thai immigrants, and do cultural activities and celebrate holidays with them. And I've really enjoyed that.
You mentioned how kind of the dynamic is kind of different if uh, you're adopted, right? And you interact with first generation Korean immigrants. Have you ever had any interesting experiences like, with
Um,
regards to that relationship or
some
dynamic?
somebody actually said something interesting. They weren't Korean, but they were Asian, and they were basically saying, you know, Korean adoptees or, second, third generation immigrants, very Americanized Koreans, the way that your face looks when you're not making an expression, the way you hold your body, the way you dress, the way you move kind of suggests that you're kind of removed from that original Korean culture. I have been to places where there were, like Korean owned institutions, and they had asked that I speak Korean, and I can't do it. But it's not really upsetting to me. It's just kind of a fact of life that I don't speak Korean, and they were willing to work with me. Um, I would like to go someday, but I don't really have any interest in learning the language right now, just because I have like so much going on. But I would like to learn a little more someday, and I would definitely love to see, um, you know, the places where my ancestors were.
Have there ever been any hardships that have arisen due to your race in in metal that, you know, at like shows or gigs or performances?
No, and I'm really happy about that. I feel very lucky in that regard. I've always had like a really good support system where I think even if people were going to, say something or do something, they would know that's not going to fly. Being in a band, it's kind of like a little family, or almost like, um, it's like a little club, and you look out for each other. And I think that kind of eases acceptance along as well, that, okay, this band is a unit. We're all different backgrounds, all different ethnicities and races, and we're working together seamlessly. So I think it actually sounds like a really good message.
And are you in this band full time, or do you have, um, I guess, a main job or a full-time job?
I definitely have a day job. I think, and I'm sure you've read, that even a lot of really famous metal bands have day jobs. We're not as active as a lot of local metal bands, even. Um, we all have day jobs. So, in a way, like it kind of stinks because it's hard to balance that energy wise or time wise sometimes. But it's also kind of liberating in a way because I don't make money from music. I'm not really beholden to like outside opinions. I can just do whatever I want and only have to answer to myself.
Have you, can you tell us more about, I guess, the balancing act, or how hard is it?
So for me, it's not too bad because I work, a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and concerts are usually, at night or on the weekend. The only thing that's kind of difficult sometimes is if we have a show like on a weeknight and we have to be at work the next day. My boss is super understanding. If I'm really tired, I can either call into work or she'll let me work from home. And my coworkers all know, that I sing in a band, and they're really supportive. So I feel really lucky in that sense.
And have your parents been supportive of your musical journey so far? And what are their thoughts on it?
So my parents, I my mother is deceased, unfortunately. I don't have a great relationship with her and my dad anymore. Long story, but they haven't really been in my life for a while. When I was a kid, you know, they they took me to bass lessons. They got me lessons for, bass guitar. And as I mentioned before, like my dad would drive me to my first band practice, but they would kind of make offhand remarks about like, oh, it's just like screaming music or whatever. So materially, they were supportive, like, I guess mentally or emotionally, kind of neutral to not so much. But I kind of I made a joke at my 32nd birthday show this July before Delta hit. I was like, I'm 32 years old. It's not just a phase, it's happening. And I think it's getting worse.
I'm sorry to hear about your mother. But I'm glad that um, you're still doing what you enjoy today. Um, so I'd like to ask some questions now about your perspectives on, I guess, some current issues or subjects.
Okay.
Um, and as you're probably aware, there's been a rise in anti-Asian sentiment, and there's been a lot of like anti-Asian violence. So what do you think, I guess, Asian musicians in metal can do to fight back? Or do you just have any like perspectives on the issue in general?
That's a great question. I think we can be there. Like when I say be there, physically be there, exist, add to the representation. I was also talking to someone, maybe a hot take. Um, I'm not the biggest fan of the Stop Asian Hate hashtag. I think it's a little bit clunky. I think we just need to say stop racism. We need to be there for the Black Lives Matter movement. We need to be there for all of our fellow musicians of color and speak out against racism. I know last, you know, last summer when a lot of people were making videos about the Black Lives Matter movement, Goat Horse showed up, Exhumed showed up, Plague Years, Frozen Soul, like a lot of big metal bands were just saying, Black Lives Matter, but also just racism is bad. And you shouldn't even have to say that, but they were out there saying like racism in general is bad. Don't do it. And I think if we all stick together in that big way, in that big community way, that really helps.
There's a lot of pretty well established metal scenes in Asian countries like, Japan or Indonesia. In the US, however, why do you think there are relatively few Asians or Asian Americans in genres of music like metal or punk or hardcore?
I can't speak to like the larger group. So in Austin, I moved to Austin to go to college. I thought there was like a larger Asian population because there were so many Asian students at UT. And I talked to a few of them and I was like, are you gonna, stay in the US after you graduate? They're like, heck no, I'm going back to China. I was like, fair enough. Um, so Austin in general has like a small Asian population. That might have something to do with it. Um, I'm sure there might be some sort of cultural elements as well, but I can't really speak to those. I think, like you said, Asian American culture is a lot different from like just Asian culture, mainland Asian. So that's probably also why there might be a difference.
Can you tell me more about the metal scene in Austin, and kind of how the scene is in Austin is different from other scenes that you've been a part of or know about?
I personally love the Austin metal scene because everybody's so like supportive of each other. People realize that there can't just be one dominant band. They lift each other up. And a lot of bands will have members who like, also book shows or do podcasts or do zines and support our scene in that way. So it becomes like a big family. I can't really speak. I've only ever lived in Oklahoma City. I think that the metal scene in Oklahoma City is smaller, but it could be growing. I've been gone for so long. Um, Austin is obviously, it has a reputation of being the live music capital of the world. So I think people may move there specifically to play music. Um, so I think that helps make it like a larger scene. We have so many clubs, so many great websites and outlets and radio stations that support us as well.
So I've noticed kind of this like opinion going around like for some time now. It's nothing new, but some people in metal kind of try to ditch the whole like metal subgenre classification system, because I guess they want to like unite everyone who listens to metal. They just call it like metal or heavy metal. Do you have any perspectives on this, and do you think classifying metal is even important?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because like I mentioned, I had done that heavy metal radio show. subgenres are very helpful for people like DJs and journalists and stuff to kind of express thoughts and feelings. For example, if I'm doing like a written review of a CD and I can't just say, oh, this is, melodic death metal, this is black metal, this is like traditional heavy metal, it's going to be harder for me to describe to the listener what they can expect. On the other hand, as a musician, a lot of times having a subgenre assigned to your music can feel kind of limiting, especially if it's not something that you agree with. So in a perfect world, like you wouldn't have to have the subgenres, but I understand why they exist and why they're useful.
And as a minority female lead singer in metal, do you envision yourself as sort of a role model for other female lead singers? And what kind of influence do you hope to have on the future of metal?
So I don't think I would want to be a role model, um, just because I'm a person. I'm flawed, just like anyone. I am really, really glad to be part of the representation for women and women of color in metal. My friend came to our last concert of the year. It was last Saturday, December 16th, and December 18th, sorry. And he is a white cisgender male. And he came up to me and he was like, Kitty, I'm so happy that you're doing what you're doing. Obviously, nowadays there is more representation of cisgender women and women of color that are doing the death metal vocals. But he said, of course, in Austin, we're a microcosm of the larger music scene. And women doing that kind of vocal is still like a small minority here in town. And he was like, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad people can see somebody in town, somebody who's gigging a lot here doing that kind of vocal, being present. I personally, one of the best moments that I had was at a Deocculted show. And after we played, this maybe like grade school age girl came up to me and she was like, this is my first metal show and I'm so excited to see a woman singer. I was really, really hoping that there would be a female musician here. And that made my day, that it could be her first experience with metal and that she could see, yeah, you can do it. This is great. This is natural. This is normal. You belong here.
So I guess to finish off this interview, my final question is, do you have any advice for aspiring metal musicians in general? And also I'd like to give you, I guess, a chance to tell us anything that you'd like to share or anything that I didn't cover.
Well, my first thing would be kind of talking to you. I could see your facial expressions when I was talking about like my favorite bands, my favorite genres, and your face was lighting up. And I can tell, you love this kind of music. When you have that true passion for heavy metal, to me, that's the most important thing. If you have it and if you want to be in a band, by all means do it. I would say if you want lessons, get them. They're great. Even if you're already a great player, you can always learn more. And don't be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed to try and fail. A lot of us have auditioned for bands that we didn't get into. A lot of us have done shows that didn't go so well. It shouldn't stop you. It happens to everyone. There's no need to be embarrassed. You will be supported no matter what gender, what race you are, what ethnicity. You belong here. And just your presence is going to make it easier for other people. And I guess to your point about anything else I want to say, there's so many great cisgender women vocalists, like women vocalists of color. Ryoko from Clint Eastwood and Dagra is one of them. She had been doing music, long before me, doing grindcore with those harsh vocals. And that was really inspiring to me. My friend Megan. So I guess I just say you belong here, no matter what, you belong.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I want to thank you so much again for talking with us today and sharing all of your amazing, band experiences, early musical experiences. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to add to the archive of stories. And thank you for shedding light on this. I think this is a really important investigation to do.